Hello, this is Peter Adams, and in this video, I'm going to give you an introduction and overview of The Hub, A Place for Reading and Writing, a new textbook published by Bedford that is designed to be used in co-rec writing programs. This textbook is appropriate, has all the material you'll need, both for the credit level English 101 course and the co-requisite course that is paired with it. The Hub is divided into 5 parts, and the first of those parts, part 1, is a series of reading and writing projects. I'm going to discuss part 1 in great detail in just a minute, but let's look at the other 4 parts first. Part 2 is all the material you'd find in a traditional writing textbook. Treatment of thesis and unity and providing support for your arguments and word choice and so forth. And then part 3 provides a set of materials that are designed to help your students improve as readers, especially improve as readers of challenging text, because the Hub is full of challenging texts. Part 4 is the very traditional treatment of research and documentation. Part 5 is not so traditional. The research tells us that the reason such a high percentage of students placed in developmental courses are unsuccessful has nothing to do with their reading and writing abilities. It has to do with their lives, which are very stressful. They can lose their jobs, they can be evicted from their apartments, their kids can get sick, and the stress becomes so great they drop out of school. And sometimes the kinds of challenges are more internal in their minds. We know that lots of students, developmental students, are unsure about whether they really belong in college or not. They feel like they may be imposters in higher education. And so this combination of life issues and affective issues increase the likelihood that students placed in developmental courses will give up and drop out. Part 5 of the Hub is a collection of materials that the instructor can use to address these kinds of issues, to get them out in the open, to have students write about them, think about them, read about them, watch videos about them. And so Part 5 is really unique to the Hub, and we think of it as very important to the overall mission of the Hub. Now back to Part 1 on those reading-writing projects. The Hub consists of 7 of these projects. Here they are. And they're all similarly designed. They focus on a single topic. Project 1 on the marshmallow test looks at Walter Mischel's work on delayed gratification and success in life. And each of them has a theme like that. And they're designed to last about 5 weeks. So our thinking is an instructor would select 3 of these and use them to sort of form the backbone of the English 101 course. The materials in these projects are designed to be used in either course. Some of them work better in the 101 and others would work better in the co-requisite section. So let's take a look at Project 3, a fairly typical project, and that will give you a better sense of what they look like. Project 3 is on the topic freedom of speech. Project 3 on freedom of speech consists of 22 units. And here we're looking at the first 10 of those units. Before we dive into them at all, I want you to look at this column in red and see the variety of pedagogies we employ in one of these units. And this is typical of all of the projects. It's a combination of asking students to do short writing assignments, usually 1 page or less, some group activities, and then to read some challenging essays. And often the writing is in response to those readings. The unit starts with a couple of units. The project starts with a couple of units that examine in a very general way what students are thinking about freedom of speech. We first ask them to write a definition of not freedom, just speech. What does the word speech mean? And then we ask them to list exceptions to the First Amendment that they think are legitimate. They next read and talk about and write about and analyze a wonderful essay, speech overview, that tries to explain why in America we put such an emphasis on freedom of speech, why that is our First Amendment, and why we pay more attention to that particular freedom than other countries do. And then we look at some other countries. We look at an international convention on racial discrimination. And then the U.S. Senate's response to that convention, which the U.S. signed, but we insisted on an exception to the part of the convention that obligates us to make it illegal to use racist speech. And we said in America that's a violation of our First Amendment. We then look at hate speech. What do we mean by it, and what harm does it do? Really moving article on freedom is the best response to hate speech, but also some discussion of other alternatives to hate speech. And so having dealt with hate speech in these 7 units, we then look more specifically at policies on college campuses. We look specifically at Colorado University and the University of Chicago at their statements on free speech. We look at the AAUP's statement, and we ask students to evaluate those, to talk about what they like about them and what they don't like about them. And then the project ends with asking the students to write a proposal, not about all the issues involved in freedom of speech, but just to focus in on one particular issue, like what limits are there on the freedom of speech of students in the classroom? What are the limits on the freedom of speech of speakers who come to campus? Write a short statement of one policy within the umbrella of free speech, and then write a 3 to 4 page essay arguing for that policy. To sum up, Project 3 on freedom of speech consists of 7 essays for the students to read, all addressing different aspects of the issues involved in freedom of speech, 7 short writing assignments for students to write. For the most part, these are low stakes, perhaps even ungraded writing assignments, 9 group activities. Now, we recommend that you do these 9 activities by breaking the class into small groups, have them wrestle with a problem, argue with each other, dive in deeply into a particular question or a particular reading, and report out to the whole group, either verbally or in some way by some kind of presentation. That's our recommendation. But for the group activities in Project 3 and all the other projects in the Hub, the group activities, with the exception of just a handful, could just as easily be done as individual activities, as homework, or in class. And so we leave that up to your discretion as to how to use those group activities. And finally, Project 3 culminates in a full-length essay. But the question arises, how are we going to integrate all the material from the other parts of the Hub, the material on writing instruction or reading instruction or research or non-cognitive issues? How are we going to merge those materials from the book into this Project 3 on freedom of speech? To illustrate how we're going to do that, I want to show you a chart that I use. Chart to represent the schedule. The 3 columns on the left are dedicated to English 101, and the 2 on the right to the co-requisite course. You can see that this was a course that met 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The second column from the left, labeled homework, is where we will list the homework that's due on each of those days. And then the third column from the left, labeled class, is where we will list what we're going to do in class on each of the 3 days for the English 101. And then over on the right side, the same thing for the co-requisite course. So let's see, when I taught this course, I was in the 7th week of the semester, where did I put the material from Project 3? So there it is, dropped into the schedule. You can see it's almost all over in the English 101 side, although occasionally, in this case, one previewing activity was over on the co-rec side. So that's my sort of skeleton framework for the course. Now I want to think about where would I drop in instruction and practice and group work on writing. That's now highlighted in green, and you can see it's about evenly split between the 101 and the co-rec. Little activities, readings, tutorials, and so forth. And how about instruction on reading? Well, it's over on the right. It's only in the co-rec course in this particular week, and it's really just all day Wednesday's class is devoted to reading. That's not always the case. Sometimes I even address reading issues with the English 101 class, but less frequently. And remember those non-cognitive issues having to do with life and a sense of being an imposter? Well, we'll squeeze those in, and they're on Monday and Friday over in the co-rec course. So what I hope this demonstrates for you is how we integrate material from the reading, from the writing, from the research, if you have it, we didn't in week 7, and from the non-cognitive section of the book into a writing project. Now, normally I would have done this planning not just for 1 week, but for the whole 5 weeks that we would be on this project number 3. But for purposes of illustrating it in this video, I thought 1 week would be sufficient. Faculty members making the transition from teaching in a traditional developmental program to teaching in a new co-requisite model are faced with several challenges. For example, most co-rec models also include the integration of reading and writing, and that means that writing teachers who have very little preparation to do so find themselves also teaching reading, and reading teachers, conversely, find themselves required to teach writing. While we recognize that the major reason why students are not successful in developmental writing programs is not because of writing issues or reading issues, but because of the complex and stressful issues in their lives. Without very much preparation or experience in addressing these non-cognitive issues, faculty nevertheless are called upon to do so in a co-rec model. Most co-rec models encourage the use of active learning, of group work, of discovery learning or inductive learning, even though there are lots of faculty members who are encountering this pedagogical approach for the first time. And finally, faculty are challenged by coordinating the 2 courses, the co-rec section and the English 101 section. How do I decide what to teach in what course? What do I do in the co-rec section? And so there's another challenge for faculty when they transition into a co-rec model. Recognizing these challenges for instructors, we have provided an instructor's manual, Instructor Support, for the hub that is unusually robust. The instructor's manual actually consists of 3 sections. Section 1 is devoted to the general context of the hub and some teaching suggestions for some of the pedagogies in the hub. For example, Chapter 1 of Section 1 actually provides a little history of the development of ALP and of other co-requisite models. Chapter 2 discusses integrated reading and writing, both why we're doing it and then lots of practical suggestions about how to do it. Chapter 3 talks about active learning, about group work or inductive learning. And once again, it explains the theory behind these pedagogies, why some faculty are finding them at least a good alternative to traditional lecture discussion, and also then some suggestions about how to go about making active learning work for you and your students. Chapter 4 explains what we mean by non-cognitive issues, explains the range of issues that are covered under this label, and then makes some suggestions about how you might organize your co-requisite course to address these issues. And then Chapter 5 it discusses the issue of how to use the hub to design the schedule for your section. Now, you saw this schedule a few minutes ago earlier in this slideshow, and I'm just showing it again at this point to say a couple things about schedules. First of all, this is a schedule just for 1 week. Of course, in the hub, of course, we include a schedule like this for all 5 weeks of, this was project 3, and then we include one like this, a 5-week schedule for each of the 7 writing projects in the hub. So instructors who are teaching without much warning, perhaps are hired at the last minute or just found out they're going to be teaching a co-rec section at the last minute, teachers pressed for time can just take one of our schedules and use it exactly the way we've worked it out for at least for the first semester that they're teaching. More experienced instructors and instructors who have a little more time can take one of our schedules and tweak it to suit their style, their pedagogy, and how they perceive the needs of their students. They can take material out that they don't like, put other stuff in that they think would be more useful. They can put their own materials that they've developed independent of the hub and integrate them into the course. So that's how I think more experienced instructors will use the schedules. And then some instructors who don't feel a need for using our schedules at all can just disregard them and make their own schedules from scratch. So that's the first 5 chapters of the instructor's manual. The final chapter, chapter 6, gives some advice about grading. This can be a little bit complicated because you're teaching the same students in 2 different sections, and how do you give a separate grade in each section? So we spend a little time in chapter 6 discussing various approaches to grading in a co-rec context. The next section, section 2 of the instructor's manual, discusses the reading writing projects in part 1 of the hub. We've seen these several times already in this video. There they are again. And for each of those projects, there's an entry in the instructor's manual that talks about each unit in each of the 23 units, for example, in project 3. Each one has its own little discussion in the instructor's manual with suggestions, possible answers, things to avoid, things to emphasize, and so forth. Section 3 of the hub deals with the topics. Remember that the topics are parts 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the hub. And in section 3, just like in section 2 on the reading writing projects, we have detailed suggestions, background, examples of responses, examples of problems that students have had with assignments on every unit in the writing section and the reading section, as well as, of course, the research section and the non-cognitive section. I hope you found this video helpful in giving you an introduction to the hub, and I hope you find the book itself helpful as you begin teaching in a co-rec model.